Okay, so the next topic here is withholding tax. So it's all about calculating the tax and holding from the invoice the tax amount with the same. I mean, if you are going to create the transaction, if withholding tax is applicable, system will create the separate invoice with the tax amount which we have to pay to tax authority. The concept and setups remain same as EBS. Of course, the concept always remains same. And when we talk about system configuration process, so it works same as EBS, but slightly they change the naming convention. Okay, what are the setups we do in EBS? Same setups will be doing, but here they change the naming convention. And if you remember EBS setups, the same will be executing. Slightly you can see the name difference. We'll see what setups required to implement withholding tax. So first what we have to do is we have to create tax authority as a supplier. Say create withholding tax authority as supplier. I have to create withholding tax authority as supplier, and in EBS we create special calendar, but that is not mandatory in all the cases in withholding tax. The same special calendar in Fusion we call as payables calendar. Just to go and define to understand, we'll create it. Otherwise, it's not mandatory. But let's include that as a part of withholding tax setup, even it is optional. So create payables calendar. Okay, as per EBS, this is special calendar. EBS we call as special calendar. Here we are calling as payables calendar. And in EBS, we go and enable withholding tax applicability and other options in payable options. Within the payable options, we can find one tab called as withholding tax. Under the tab, you give all the specifications where we apply withholding tax calculation for our operating unit. But here, instead of doing that setups in the relevant options in Fusion, we have a separate task called as withholding tax options. You can say configure withholding tax options. Okay, we have a separate task to set up withholding related setups. And after once we're done with that, we'll create tax codes. And after tax codes, we create tax groups. Basically in EBS, we create tax codes under tax groups. Here the same tax group name they are giving tax classification. Say create tax classification. It's nothing but tax group. If you compare with EBS, in EBS you could see as a tax group, but here for that the task name they given as a create tax classification. I mean they given name as tax classification instead of group. That's equal to group only. So in the setup process, in one place you can see classification, in another place you can see as a tax group. That's how they kept that information in the application. Now finally we have to assign this tax group, nothing but tax classification only. Okay. Assignment time they given as a tax group. Definition time they given as a tax classification. So anyway, as a part of setups, say assign tax group. Tax group is nothing but tax classification. Both are same. Okay. Assign tax group to our standard supplier. And done. These are the basic setups we have to complete. And once we are ready with these setups, okay, so when you create the invoice based on the triggering point which will be setting in the withholding tax options, you may set system has to calculate and create withholding tax at the time of invoice creation or payment creation. Accordingly, system will create the withholding tax invoice with withholding tax amount. So here we'll take that point what we will be testing. We'll create one standard invoice just as a, okay, and system will create System creates withholding tax invoice with tax amount. Okay, system creates withholding tax invoice with tax amount. So this is just we'll see this process. First we have to complete these setups, and after completing setups we'll create standard invoice. So since we are going to apply the tax group to the same standard supplier, which supplier will be using standard invoice, system will identify as tax applicability, and it will calculate and it will create the separate invoice. This invoice would be against the tax authority. We'll see that. Fine. First we have to create withholding tax authority as a supplier. We know how to create the supplier. So apart from the definition, just we have to select supplier type as a tax authority. That's how system will recognize the supplier can be used in this process. We'll see that. We're using the user called as Google. So now we have to create the supplier. To create the supplier, navigation is within the navigator under procurement, right under procurement section. You can find the task called as suppliers. Just click on suppliers task and go to task list. Say create supplier. And provide the supplier name. Say Google withholding tax authority. Select relationship as a spend authorized and select tax organization type any one of the classification for organization. Say corporate. Say create. So here system created profile for this supplier. Now we have to select supplier type. So based on this selection only, system will differentiate the supplier is tax authority or standard supplier. Select supplier type as tax authority. Okay, and go to payments tab. You may set default payment method. Select, or else at least we have to set at site level. Save it. Go to addresses. Say create. So we can just define the address which can be used for site definition. So withholding tax address. The addresses belongs to which country? So US. Just you can fill these details and select postal code, and rest of field system will select. So what purpose we are going to use this address? Only payment, right? We never place orders to tax authority. So only purpose is remit to, right? Payment purpose that you can specify. Now you can say save and close. If you want to set payment method as a default at address level, yes, that we can do. That we can do more. Click on site, say create. Select address to create the site. The same address name system is defaulting as a site name. You can override, say withholding tax site. Just click on save. And go to payments tab. It's a defaulting and site assignments. Okay. So you can just you can click on add, or else you can click on auto create assignments. If you click on auto create assignments, so this user acting as a procurement for how many BUs, the same BU it will get default. If you have any centralized procurement related configuration, so which is a client BU, which is a build to BU, accordingly system will default. Now if you click on auto create assignments or BU, this BU will get assigned, this site will get assigned to this BU only. You can click on add and you can select, or else simply you can click on auto create assignments. Okay, done. Now go to invoicing tab. Here you have to specify invoice currency and payment currency. Okay, select invoice currency USD and payment currency also USD, and say save and close. Fine. So we created tax authority as a supplier. Okay, tax authority we created as a supplier. So this special calendar as per EBS in Fusion we are calling as payables calendar. It is not mandatory in all the scenarios which we deal with the withholding tax, but just for our understanding we'll go and create the payables calendar. So from the project or directly from FSM homepage you can search for payables calendar. You can go with this option, or we can do it from project. Payables calendar. Okay, click on go to task icon. Click on create. Name we can give withholding tax calendar. And we know in EBS, when you talk about special calendar, that can be used for 4 different purposes. One is withholding tax, and other options are recurring invoice and payment terms and key indicators. Now, what are the payables calendar we create? If the payables calendar for the purpose of payment terms, you can select calendar type as a payment terms. Other than payment terms, that can be for withholding tax or recurring invoice or key indicators, you have to select the purpose as general purpose. Only for payment terms you have to select payment terms. Other than that you have to select as a general purpose. That calendar can be used for any other concepts. It could be recurring or withholding or key indicators. Okay, now we are not creating the special calendar or say payables calendar for payment terms purpose. It's a general purpose. When you say general, it can be withholding or recurring or any other purpose. So period frequency, say monthly, that means system will create the periods automatically in this payables calendar. So how, just whatever the process we just seen for accounting calendar. For accounting calendar we have to specify the required inputs. Based on that, system creates accounting calendar. Same logic is applicable for this payables calendar also. Okay, specify period frequency as monthly. So system is, since it's a monthly, it's taking the total periods as a per year 12, and here you can give the starting date. So starting date you can say 1st Jan, and period name format, the month it should come in 3 digits. That's fine. Just say generate periods. Click on generate periods. Okay, system created periods for current month. If you want to add one more year, you can click on add year, or else say save and close. So this is how we can create the special calendar. Here we are calling as payables calendar. Fine, but anyway, it's not mandatory. We'll see. Okay. The next step is configure withholding tax options. Search for withholding tax options. Withholding tax options. So here is the task: manage tax reporting under withholding tax options. Okay, this setup is equal to the EBS payable options. Within the payable options, we find the tab called as withholding tax. Under that, what are the specifications we give? The similar specifications we provide through this task. Okay, manage tax reporting under withholding tax options. Just click on go to task icon. Okay, so since we navigated to this task by selecting the scope, already scope is selected as a part of project, so system is defaulting our business unit, and here you have to specify. So withholding tax creation should be applicable for which event class, which transaction invoice type, say standard invoice. So here by default system is enabling apply withholding, process transaction taxes, allow manual withholding. All this system is defaulting. The point to calculate the withholding tax is invoice creation. So tax invoice creation point is invoice. That means system will calculate the withholding tax at the time of invoice creation. Whatever the tax is calculated with the tax amount, system will create the withholding tax invoice also at the time of invoice creation. Okay, the system is taking all the defaults. If required, we can change, or else we can proceed with the same. Select start date, then say save and close. Okay, so that's how we have to specify. Now we have to create the tax code. We'll go and create the withholding tax code. Search for tax codes. So manage tax codes, nothing but manage withholding tax codes. Click on go to task icon. Okay, say create. When you compare with EBS tax code definition, it is slightly different. Here, when you create the withholding tax code, you have to specify the tax regime also. We'll see those points here. Okay, so this tax code we want to use in which business unit? Select RBU, the Google US business unit. The tax code definition we want to give for which country? Because here we are going to create the tax regime. So that is the reason we have to provide this country information also. Select country, then tax regime code. It comes under which tax regime? If already you implemented fusion tax, nothing but EBT as per EBS. So that you can select, or else we can create our own tax regime for withholding tax. Click on create. It's a very simple definition. Say Google withholding tax regime. The same name you can take. Start date is today's date. So save and close. So now system will select tax regime code. Now we can create the tax code. Just click on create. You can give the name as withholding tax. Sorry, at the rate of say 15%. Select start date. Select tax liability account for withholding tax. Just look for that relevant account. Withholding tax. And tax authority. Okay, we created supplier and we classified that supplier as a tax authority. So that supplier you can find from here. Google withholding tax authority, select site also. Say save and close. Okay, we created tax code definition. The same name you can take as a tax rate code also. The tax rate type is percentage based tax. Okay, here you can click on rate period section. Just click on add. Here you can specify that percentage, say 15%, and select effective start date. Okay, system is defaulting the same tax liability account from the tax. Fine. So if you are going to calculate the withholding tax, some threshold control base where you will be having the thresholds, where you will be period based, you want to set threshold. In that case, you can use the withholding tax calendar here. You can click on add threshold basis, you can select and all. That's the different scenarios. So this is the general practice. This is how we see. Fine. Now you can say save and close. We create a tax code. Now we have to create the tax group. That same tax group we are calling as tax classifications, right? So next to tax codes, we have a task called as manage withholding tax classifications. Click on go to task icon. Okay, just click on create. We'll give the name as Google withholding tax group. They're given the name as classification, but going forward when you try to assign this name to supplier, there you can find the field called as withholding tax group only. Okay, you can give any name, you can give the classification or group, nothing wrong. Okay, Google withholding tax group, the same name you may take as a description. Select starting date and just click on add. Okay, direct tax rate rules. Select our business unit. Select tax code. So if you have multiple tax codes, here you can list out. That's how we can group the multiple tax codes into group definition. So only one we have. So save and close. Now this withholding tax classification, or say withholding tax group, whatever we created, we have to assign to our standard supplier. For how many suppliers the withholding tax is applicable, for all the suppliers we have to assign. Here we have only one supplier. We'll go and assign this, okay, the tax classification or tax group to our standard supplier. Fine. So go to our standard supplier. Under procurement, click on suppliers. Say manage suppliers. Our supplier name is Google, sorry, Google supplier 1, standard supplier. Fine. Here we are at profile level, right? Under profile you can go to the tab called as income tax, and here we have a checkbox called as use withholding tax. Enable. Here name they given as withholding tax group, nothing but withholding tax classification. Select our withholding tax group name, Google withholding tax group, and save it. Go to sites and click on edit and go to site assignments, and here we have to enable use withholding tax at site level for this specific business unit. Enable and assign withholding tax group to this site related BU, site specific BU. Done. So say save and close. These are the basic setups which you have to perform to calculate and to create the withholding tax invoice. So save and close. So now if you create any invoice against this Google Supplier 1, system will calculate the withholding tax, and based on the tax amount, system will create the tax in withholding tax invoice also, right? So these are the basic setups. If you compare with EBS also same, there is no difference, just you could see the naming convention different. In EBS you can see as a special calendar, here payables calendar. Here we are just discussing about configure withholding tax options, but in EBS we configure payables options for withholding tax and the tax group, but here the naming convention they given as classification. Finally we have to assign that tax group to suppliers, for which suppliers withholding tax is applicable. Fine. Now we'll go to the invoice workbench and we'll create the standard invoice. Okay, switch to invoice workbench. Go to task list, say create invoice. Fine. Select our supplier, Google Supplier 1. So here you can give the invoice number. So invoice amount is so $10,000, so let's say $1 lakh. Line amount is 1 lakh. So validate the invoice. Now system will calculate the withholding tax amount. At the same time it will create withholding tax invoice also. So here if you notice, our invoice amount is 1 lakh and system calculated withholding tax amount as a $15,000 because we given tax rate as 15%. So now due to supplier is only 85,000. 85,000 we have to pay to this our Google Supplier 1. Remaining 15,000 we have to pay to tax authority. Okay, just we validated, then you can say save and close. Now we can find withholding tax invoice which is created by system. Here it's not reflecting because that is not validated. So go to manage invoices. And search with the supplier name. Google withholding tax authority. Just click on search. So system created with tax invoice with 15,000. So this is the invoice number system generated. The tax authority name is the same, withholding tax rate. Okay, from here also you can validate. So if this is the case, you can go to actions and click on edit. It will open all the fields if you want to modify, and you can submit for validation, accounting, and processing the payment. That is a very standard process. Okay, so this is all about withholding tax concept. Fine, we just completed required setups and we created standard invoice. System created withholding tax invoice against the tax authority to process the payment to tax authority. If we compare with EBS, we have as these, just naming convention only they changed. So we're done with that. Now we'll see PayAlone concept. So when you talk about PayAlone, we know like by default system will allow us to process the payment for multiple invoices with one check. By using one document or say one check, we can issue the payment for multiple invoices. That is by default. That's how our application supports. But if you have a requirement of setting the restriction on document usage for the invoices, we can use the PayAlone. If you set the PayAlone control, what system will do? So for each document, okay, or for each invoice, we have to use the separate document, separate check. So to implement that condition in the application, we can use the PayAlone. That means if you have 10 invoices for the same supplier, those could be for same site also. So you cannot make the payment for those 10 invoices with a single check when you implement PayAlone. When you implement PayAlone, each invoice need to be processed. Okay, each invoice payment need to be processed with a separate check. We'll see that. So if you want to implement supplier level, we have to enable it. Say enable PayAlone option at supplier level. And for testing purpose, we'll create two invoices. Say invoice 1 and invoice 2. We'll create two invoices and we'll test whether system will allow us or not to select two invoices with one check by processing the payment. Okay, we'll try to process the payment. Okay, by creating the payment we can understand how it works. Fine. So for first we have to specify for which supplier this PayAlone option should be applicable. Even if you don't set this PayAlone option at supplier level, invoice creation time also you can set it. But if you set it at supplier level, that would get defaulted for all the supplier invoices. Okay, go to our supplier. Manage suppliers. Before that, what we'll do is, so whenever we search for our supplier as Google, along with the Google supplier one, system will display Google withholding tax authority in the field. So anyway, we tested withholding tax concept. Okay, now we will just change this name to different name so that whenever you search for Google supplier, system won't display Google withholding tax authority. I'll just edit this name so that this name display we can avoid this application process. And already we tested withholding tax calculations and all. Now we can go to supplier and we'll remove that assignment, withholding tax group assignment to at site assignment level. So remove group and uncheck use withholding tax. The same we can do at profile level also. Go to income tax tab, remove group and say use withholding tax as disabled. Just uncheck it. Say save and close. From now for this supplier related invoices, withholding tax is not applicable. Already we tested, we don't require. So we're removing it. Fine. Now we'll see the PayAlone option. So for which suppliers you want to implement this condition, go to that supplier. Our supplier name is Google supplier. Click on edit. So that option you can set at various levels: profile level, address level, site level. Different levels you can set. To default, if you create one more address, one more site, or else straight away you can set at site level. We'll set all the levels, no issues. So profile level, you can go to payments. Okay, under payments, go to payment attributes tab. Under payment attributes, select tab called as payment specifications. Under payment specifications, you can see the checkbox called as pay each document alone. So enable and save it. The same you can repeat at address level also. Go to payments, go to payment attributes, payment specifications, enable it. Finally, it is required at site level. Whatever we have at site level, that only will reflect for the transaction process. I mean, when invoice creation. So as a mandatory, we have to do at site level. Go to sites, click on edit. Go to payments tab, payment attributes, payment specifications, enable this checkbox. Now we enable this PayAlone option for this supplier. This is applicable for the invoices which you create from now. For past invoices, this option is not applicable. Only after enabling this checkbox, what are the invoices we create, for those invoices only this PayAlone option would be applicable. Fine. So we'll go and create two invoices which we can use for the PayAlone testing purpose at the time of payment. So navigate to invoice workbench. Go to task list, say create invoice. Okay, and invoice number. So invoice amount is $25,000. You can enter line amount also same. You can validate it. Before that, you can verify. If you go to manage installments, since we enabled PayAlone option at supplier site level, that would get default to invoice. See, PayAlone is defaulting. Reason, the supplier site level we enabled. without enabling at supplier site level. If you want to just make specific invoice as a PayAlone invoice creation time through manage installments, you can do it. So you validate, so post to ledger. Done. Okay, say save and create next. As we just planned, we have to create one more invoice. So invoice number, invoice amount, say $20,000. Enter line amount also same. So validate it. The optional you can submit for accounting. Now we have two invoices which we created after enabling PayAlone at this site. Fine, done. So save and close. Now go to payment workbench. Go to task list. Say create payment. So supplier. So instead of selecting supplier from drop down, directly you can type for the supplier. Type supplier name and tab out. It will fetch automatically. It's done. So disbursement bank account. Select payment process profile and payment document. Fine. Now just we are using the payment document 7. With this document, with this check, we can issue the payment for only one invoice out of those two invoices which we created. So if you notice here, PayAlone, that is applicable only for these two invoices. These two invoices we created after enabling the PayAlone, and PayAlone is not applicable for this, the first invoice and last invoice. Reason, before enabling those we created. So these two invoices you can select to issue with the payment with one check. Okay, for these two invoices we can issue the payment with a single check, but when I talk about these two invoices, each invoice you have to use a separate document. So we'll try to do that. I'm selecting the invoice number 1, say apply. It will select, you could see in the background system selected that invoice, and I'll try to select one more invoice for which invoice PayAlone is applicable. It should not allow. Say apply. You cannot pay this invoice with other invoice because it is a PayAlone invoice. Or you already selected another PayAlone invoice. Yes, already another PayAlone we selected, as well as this also PayAlone. So this is how we can set a control. Now you can process the payment for these two invoices separately. So save and close. Fine. That's all about PayAlone concept. To set a control on payment process, whether you want to use separate document for each invoice or not. If you want to use separate document for each invoice, and implement PayAlone, otherwise the standard default functionality will support. Fine. Now we'll look at foreign currency invoice and payment creation. Okay. So when we talk about foreign currency invoice and payment creation, first of all we have to make sure we have a bank account which allows us to process foreign currency payments. Okay, so say enable multi-currency account. Multi-currency account option for bank account. So bank account level, we have to enable multi-currency checkbox so that that bank account can be used to process foreign currency payments also. So we'll take the case, we'll create invoice in our functional currency. It's nothing but USD. Our ledger currency is USD. That's what we are testing now. So we'll create invoice in USD. Okay, and we'll here foreign currency, not cross currency, right? Fine. So we'll create invoice in foreign currency that you can take as INR, and we'll make the payment also in INR. Going forward, we'll be testing cross currency payment where we can create invoice in one currency, payment in the different currency. Our functional currency is USD. Instead of creating invoice and payment in our functional currency, we are going to create the invoice and payment in the foreign currencies. Fine. So when you create invoice in INR, system has to convert the INR balances into USD balances. For that, we require conversion. Daily rates we have to define. Say define daily rates. So we have to provision to bank account to use for foreign currency payments, and when you create the invoice or process the payment in foreign currency, for conversion we have to maintain the daily rates. That's all. So if you remember EBS setups, if you want to process the foreign currency invoice and payment process in payable options, you can find one tab called as currency tab. Under that you have to enable multi-currency account. Okay, multi-currency checkbox you have to enable, and you have to give the specification default rate, and the accounts also you have to specify. So that's that setup you have to complete. But here, as a part of common options, already we given realized gain and realized loss accounts, but you don't need to enable. So system should allow to process the multi-currency transactions in particular business unit. That setup is not required. So these are the two setups which you have to perform: enabling multi-currency account at bank account, define daily rates. These two setups will support to process foreign currency invoice and payment. Okay, it will allow us to create the foreign currency invoice. The same we can process as a payment. We'll see that. So go to our bank account. This will navigate from the project. Search for bank accounts. Just click on manage bank accounts. Click on go to task icon. Find our bank account. We created a bank account as Google corporate account. Just click on edit. And here we have one checkbox called as multi-currency account. Enable it. Okay. So this selection would be enough to process foreign currency payments by using this bank account. If you compare with the EBS, in EBS, if you want to do the same activity, foreign currency payment process, along with the checkbox within the bank account, you can find invoice options, payables options. Under that, you have to enable one more checkbox called as multi-currency payments. One more checkbox you have to enable. In case of receipts, and if you want to process the receipts in the different currency, we have to enable additional checkbox called as multi-currency receipts. But here, to process payments from payables or receipts from receivables in different currencies, we don't have separate controls. If you enable bank account level account is multi-currency account, this account can be used in any process. Okay, in any process, in any application that can be used. Prior to that, this selection also important, right? Already we selected for payables and receivables. If you enable account is multi-currency account, this account can be used in payables or receivables to process different currency payments. So save and close. No additional selection is required bank account level. Done. Now we have to create the daily rates. Exchange rates we have to create between USD and INR. So exchange rates you can create only through spreadsheet. Only through spreadsheet you can create. We cannot create exchange rates within the application. We don't have any functionality which supports to create the exchange rates within the application. Only you can create from spreadsheet. So if you want to create the exchange rates from spreadsheet, you have to make sure that already you downloaded ADFD and you install in your machine. Okay, so this is a prerequisite. This is a prerequisite to create the payable invoices. If you want to create payable invoice in the spreadsheet, you have to install this ADFDI in your client system, from which system you are accessing instance. And if you want to create daily rates also, this is a mandatory. Okay, uh, mandatory. I mean, it would become mandatory where you have to download and install in your machine. Without ADFDA installation, you cannot create the daily rates. You cannot open that spreadsheet to create the daily rates. Okay, just notice this point. This you should treat as a prerequisite to create the invoices through spreadsheet or to create the daily rates from spreadsheet. ADFDA is prerequisite. Fine. So now we'll go and create the daily rates. From here also you can search for daily rates. Search for daily rates. So manage daily rates. Click on go to task icon. And here we have a tab called as daily rates. Click on daily rates and say create in spreadsheet. Okay, just we have to click on create in spreadsheet. Just click on create in spreadsheet. So it's connecting to create daily rates spreadsheet. Say okay. Say connect. And username, the same credentials. Just click on login. Just say skip. Now it will create the framework where we can enter the daily rates. Okay, from this sheet we can create the daily rates. Rate type can be any rate type. From here you can create. Okay, from currency, say USD. If you create USD to INR, automatically system will create inverse rate INR to USD. So USD to INR rate type is say corporate. From conversion date and to conversion date. Say today, just for today we require rates 11th April 18 to conversion date. Conversion rate says 65. So once we just load these rates into application, you could see inverse rate also. Here it won't create directly. You can go to create daily rates and say submit. Say okay. here you can get the confirmation. Row inserted successfully. Okay, one row. Say OK. Done. Now the same rates, whatever we loaded, you can find from here. You can just go with this. Search. Rate date we given as a today date. From and to date we given today date only. Rate type is corporate. I think it's not updated. If already rate is available in the application, if you create once again, system will override it. Okay, basically the system should override. Okay, the moment you just load, even the previous rate is available, it has to override. It's not somehow it's not happening. So I'll just set manually. I'll just update it. No issues. So save and close. But you cannot create from here only spreadsheet. Okay, so this is the point we have to understand. So we're done with the required setups. Okay, we just enabled bank account level as a multi-currency account, and the rates also defined. Now we'll go and create invoice in INR. So go to invoice workbench, click on invoices, go to task list, say create invoice. Supplier name, Google supplier. Invoice number 3. So we want to create invoice in which currency? In INR. So select invoice currency as INR. Okay. So amount, say 5 lakhs rupees. Okay. Or say just so 5 or 6 lakhs. And enter same as a distribution. So line amount is 6 lakhs. Now if you go to show more, here you could say since we selected invoice currency INR, system is defaulting payment currency also to INR only. I can validate it. You may just post to ledger. Say save and close. Fine, done. Now we'll go to payments. So create payment, or else you can use the painful option also. So better you can search. So disbursement bank account and payment currency. We are going to make the payment in which currency, that you have to select. Select payment process profile. Select document. Select foreign currency invoice. The only one we have, foreign currency invoice. Say save and close. If you want to see the conversion and all, you can save. You can go to additional, and from there you can see the other tabs.
In the before selecting that invoice, if you did not choose that payment currency as INR, also it will still pull up that invoice.
Sorry. If you don't select INR,
In that payment currency field,
hmm.
if we did not choose anything, it will still pull it up, correct? Even if it is INR.
No. Because you have, based on the currency, it will filter. Okay, you given supplier. Okay, when you give the supplier with the same supplier, you can have a transactions in different currency. You should specify the currency. Like currency is mandatory field over there.
Okay.
Based on currency, it will filter. Yeah. So that's all about foreign currency invoice creation payment. So we created invoice with the today date, and we process payment also with the today date, and the rate remains same. So that is the reason there won't be any realized gain or loss. If you take real scenario, you may create invoice in foreign currency today, you may make the payment after 1 month. By the time rate fluctuation you can see in the market, accordingly you will maintain the rates when you make the payment. Okay, the variance will fall into realized gain or loss accounts. So here that is not applicable, because with the same day with the same rate we created invoice and payment also. So that's all about foreign currency invoice and payment process. Now we'll see the supplier merge. So we'll create one more
Can we make a payment in USD currency?
sorry.
We created invoice in INR, but
Correct.
we want to make a payment in USD.
Yeah, that is possible. That we call as cross currency payments. Here is the concept.
Okay.
Okay, the cross currency payments we cannot do in EBS, right? There is no functionality, but they introduced in Fusion. We'll see that. We are going to work on it. After completing this, we can go to cross currency payments. Fine. So supplier merge. It's all about merging one supplier with another supplier. That reason could be duplication, or just acquisition, or any reason. So it's a simple activity as EBS, like how we do. So to test this functionality, we'll create one more supplier. Already we have one supplier called as Google supplier 1. Now I'll create one more supplier, and this Google supplier 1 will merge with, okay, we'll merge this Google supplier with Google INC. Okay, we'll create new supplier called as Google INC, and we'll merge Google supplier 1 with Google INC, so that all the transactions, okay, what are the transactions we have with this Google supplier 1 will get merged with this supplier. So how to perform that, we'll see. So first we'll go and create new supplier called as Google INC. So we have to go to supplier definition page. So under procurement we have a task called as suppliers. So create supplier. Supplier name is Google INC. Relationship spend authorized, tax organization type is corporation, say create. So system is showing there are some potential matches found, that is our supplier on Google supplier 1. Yes, so system is showing just there are some potential matches which are similar to this Google INC. Yes, this name is Google INC, that other name Google supplier 1. The match score is 50%. You can say ignore match results and create as a new supplier. To avoid the duplication, okay, system is showing this message. Okay, we'll just go and create the address. And write some test as address information, and this address belongs to which country. Select country, say US, and select postal code. Any one of the postal code you can select, and purpose is say ordering under remit to purpose. And say save and close, and create site against this address. Go to sites, say create. Select address name. You can just make it as ANC site. So save up to here. Now you can go to payments, mark any one of the payment method as a default, then go to site assignments, say auto create. So system will default for which we use this user is acting as a procurement agent. Say save and close. Now we have total 2 suppliers, right? Supplier Google supplier 1 and Google INC. Now we will go and merge Google supplier 1 with Google INC. Okay, so to perform that merge, you can go to task list under suppliers only. Go to task list, and here is a task to merge. Task name is merge suppliers. Click on merge supplier. It's all about submitting the request by selecting so which supplier need to be merged with which supplier. Okay, so here merge suppliers, we have to submit the request and click on add. It's a reversible activity. Once you merge, you cannot undo that, right? From supplier, which supplier you want to merge? Google supplier 1. The Google supplier 1, which site? Only one site you have the same, and you want to merge this Google supplier 1 with which supplier? Google INC supplier. So when you merge this supplier with this supplier, the same site you want to copy to this supplier. In that case, you can enable copy, or else here you can specify this supplier site only. So which information you want to merge, that you can specify. All invoices means paid and unpaid. None means you don't want to transfer anything, but you want to merge it. So that system will inactivate the supplier site other details. For that purpose, you may do it. You may not want to merge the transaction, just party level you can do it. And only purchase invoices, purchase orders, and all invoices, purchase orders and unpaid invoices, or unpaid invoices only. You can select this option. Anyway, now we don't have any purchase orders. Now you may select as all invoices. Click on submit. So this transaction is irreversible. It may result in updating to transaction. Yes, it will happen because we selected transfer option also. You want to continue, say yes. Okay, system will trigger the merge job, and if you go to ESS job page, you can see that. So merge supplier request system is submitting. Of course, here we are calling as job. Fine, it succeeded status. Now we can go and verify. Okay, the transactions are moved to new supplier or not. You can go to invoice workbench, go to task list. So manage invoices. Click on search. So all invoice got merged from Google Supplier 1 to Google IRC. So this is just we can merge suppliers if required, supplier related transactions also. So this is all about supplier merge to understand. The next concept is interest invoice configuration process. It may require some time to test. I mean, maybe it require more than 10 to 15 minutes. So already 9:25. Okay, this concept we'll see in the tomorrow session. Okay, so that's all for today. Any questions from anyone, please? Any questions from any?
But the supplier merge, once the invoice is moved to the new supplier, right? Do you have any audit trail on it?
So audit trail in the sense just it's all about just now you can go and verify that you can verify that there should be some reason why you are moving. It's all about duplication you did, or else you have a two suppliers, supplier organization 1 or organization 2. Organization 1 and 2 are acting as your suppliers. So in that case, say organization 1 is acquired organization 2. Now you all the suppliers in your system you have to maintain as a organization 1. Now you can merge organization 2 with organization 1. Nothing but those are your suppliers. So you'll do it. It's all about audit and all. Definitely for everything we do audit and all. Whether they look at that point or not, that's up to their organization. There are specific reasons why we are doing that. So
No, no, no. No. My question is, do you have any audit trail on the invoice, like from which supplier it got, transferred to which supplier?
yeah, that reference would be there in the record itself. Yeah,
Let me record it.
that system track. Yeah, fine. The reference you can find out. Yeah. Any other questions, please?
For the foreign currency payment, how does the separate remittance advice go?
So separate remittance, if you see, it's that you can create how many formats you required and all. If you want to maintain separately, yes, that also you can use it. So in that case, you can maintain the separate bank accounts, and that you have to manage. Okay, when you are processing, you can select the separate remittance advice to print that information to send. So the separate format you can map and you can keep with that, and you may have a separate payment process request which will be defining. So which will support for only foreign currency payments that we have to maintain separately, like we have to do that separate definitions. Okay, so from where we'll be creating those all the definitions, so I'll take you through that as a part of formats where we can see all the remittance advice or anything, whatever the formats, templates or say layouts which need to be defined. Here I'll take you through that point. And once we're done with that, how you want to manage that with the different payment process profiles, and how that which bank account, which currency payments you want to process that. So we have to take the decision depending on scenario, and accordingly it will be printed.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. So any other questions here, please? Fine, no questions. So we'll connect tomorrow, same time, and we'll continue from here. Thank you all.